everybody. It's Nathaniel Avila reporting from San Antonio, and we are here with Jessica Vega reporting from another part of San Antonio. How are you doing over there in that part of San Antonio?
I'm okay. We were really hoping for snow yesterday, but I think any part of San Antonio that got snow got like 5 minutes of snow if they were lucky.
Right. It was snowing in Dallas, and that's all I saw on Instagram, which is people posting stuff on like social media about the snow.
Yeah, we don't get snow often over here, like south of Texas. So even to hear that it was snowing in Austin was odd. And I was tempted to drive out there just so my kids could see it, but it was literally raining and gross and cold like all day. I just didn't want to take them out into that. But then I guess that kind of comes with the territory of snow. I don't know. I don't know. We don't really experience it over here.
We haven't experienced, like, Dallas hasn't experienced snow in years. This is the first time in like a long time, and it didn't really stick. So it just like snowed for like a couple hours, and then it just turned into rain, and then it just stopped. All right. So you know what we're talking about today?
I do, but you tell us.
Okay, I'll tell you. We're talking about Vlad the Impaler. Mm-hmm. Now, he was also known as Vlad the Third, most commonly known as Vlad the Impaler or Vlad Dracula. Ooh. Ooh, I got a new my documentary got into another let me see. It's a finalist. I got a final listing on Virgin Spring. Yay.
Woo-hoo!
Good job. So anyway, it was also known as Vlad Dracula, and he was the Voivode of Wallachia 3 times between 1448 and his death. And he believed he's also the inspiration, Bram Stoker's inspiration for Dracula, the very famous vampire novel.
Did not know that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Dracula, the vampire character, was based off of this guy. And maybe, like, after you hear the story, you could probably find out, you know, why. Or, like, why he was inspired by that. So, today, I'm going to, like, list the sources that we're going to be going over, like, the primary sources. There's also a bunch of numerous secondary sources, but I'm just going to list the primary sources. So the first one would be the Corpus Dracularium by Thomas M. Bond and Adrian George is another one. And then we got the Histories, Volume 2, Books 6 through 8 by Launicus Chalcocodiles, translated by Anthony Kodelis. And we got Montai Kazaku's Dracula by that guy and Stephen W. Reinert, and translated by Alice Brinton, Catherine Haley, Nicole Mandorsky, and Stephen W. Reinert. So those are basically the main bits. All right, you ready to dive into this long backstory?
Sure.
All right. So, first things first, the expression Dracula, which is now primarily known as the name of a fictional vampire, was for centuries known as a sobriquet of Vlad III. So, diplomatic reports and popular stories refer to him as Dracula, Dracuglia, or Dracula with a K, already in the 15th century. So, he himself signed his 2 letters as Draculia, or Draculia with a K, in late 1470s. So his name had its origins in the sobriquet of his father, Vlad Dracul, which was Romanian for Vlad the Dragon, who received it after he became a member of the Order of the Dragon. So Dracula is the Slavic genitive form of Dracul, meaning the son of Dracul or the dragon. In modern Romanian, Dracul means the devil, which has contributed to Vlad's reputation. Vlad III is also known as Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler in Romanian historiography. So this sobriquet is connected to the implement, into the impalement. That was his favorite method of execution. So the Ottoman writer Tursun Beg referred to him as the Impaler Lord around 1500. Mircea the Shepherd, Voivode of Wallachia, used this sobriquet when referring to Vlad III in a letter of grant on April 1st, 1551. So let's talk about his beginning. You ready?
Okay.
So Vlad was the second legitimate son of Vlad II Dracul, who was the illegitimate son of Mircea I of Wallachia. So, Vlad II had won the moniker Dracul for his membership in the Order of the Dragon, a militant fraternity founded by the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. The Order of the Dragon was dedicated to halting the Ottoman advance into Europe. As he was old enough to be a candidate to the throne of Wallachia in 1448, his time of birth would have been between 1428 and 1431. Vlad was most probably born after his father settled in Transylvania in 1429. Historian Radu Florescu writes that Vlad was born in the Transylvanian Saxon town of Sageshoara, then in the Kingdom of Hungary. So, where his father lived in a three-story stone house from 1431 to 1435. Modern historians identify Vlad's mother as either the daughter of a kinswoman of Alexander I of Moldavia or his father's unknown first wife. So we don't know who his mom is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So Vlad II, Dracul, seized Wallachia after the death of his half-brother, Alexander I Aldea, in 1436. One of his charters, which was issued on January 20th, 1437, preserved the first reference to Vlad III and his elder brother, Mircea, mentioning them as their father's firstborn sons. They were mentioned in 4 further documents between 1437 to 1439. The last of the 4 charters also referenced their younger brother. So after the meeting with John Hunyadi, voivode of Transylvania, Vlad II Dracul did not support an Ottoman invasion of Transylvania on March 1442. The Ottoman Sultan, Murad II, ordered him to come to Gallipoli to demonstrate his loyalty. Vlad and Radu accompanied their father to the Ottoman Empire, where they were all imprisoned. Vlad Dracul was released before the end of the year, but Vlad and Radu remained hostage to secure his loyalty. They were held in prison in the fortress of Ergrigols, according to contemporaneous Ottoman chronicles. Their lives were especially in danger after their father supported Vladislaus, King of Poland and Hungary, against the Ottoman Empire during the Crusade of Varna in 1444. Vlad II Dracul was convinced that his 2 sons were butchered for the sake of Christian peace, but neither Vlad nor Radu was murdered or mutilated after their father's rebellion. Vlad Dracul again acknowledged the Sultan's suzerainty and promised to pay a yearly tribute to him in 1446 to 1447. John Hunyadi, who became the regent governor of Hungary in 1446, broke into Wallachia in November 1447. The Byzantine historian Michael Critobulus wrote that Vlad and Radu fled to the Ottoman Empire, which suggests that the Sultan had allowed them to return to Wallachia after their father paid homage to him. Vlad Dracul and his eldest son Mircea were murdered. Hunyadi made Vladislav II, son of Vlad Dracul's cousin Dan II, the ruler of Wallachia. So what are we thinking? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, it's because they're being loud upstairs.
Oh.
No, it's a lot. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So now you're seeing like there's like a lot of things going on in Eastern Europe during this time. A lot of unrest, a lot of like power struggles, especially with the Ottoman Empire. So they're definitely being painted out as the bad guys in this whole thing. So what do you think about them, like the Ottoman Emperor just killing Vlad's father and brother?
That's another power trip.
Mm-hmm. What do you think that's going to do to what would happen? What do you think that's going to do to Vlad psychologically?
Go crazy.
Go crazy. Don't mind if I do. Do you remember that Simpsons episode?
No.
It was supposed to be. It was a parody of The Shining, where Homer was like, all what was it? Oh, well, no beer and no donut, like no TV and no beer make Homer something something, and then Marge goes, "Go crazy," and then Homer goes, "Don't mind if I do."
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, because
I haven't seen The Simpsons in forever.
It's still going on. It's still going on.
Never ending.
Okay, so upon the death of his father and elder brother, Vlad became a potential claimant to Wallachia. Vladislav II of Wallachia accompanied John Hunyadi, who launched a campaign against the Ottoman Empire in September 1448. Taking advantage of his opponent's absence, Vlad broke into Wallachia at the head of an Ottoman army in early October. He had to accept that the Ottomans had captured the fortress of Gheorghiu in the Danube and strengthened it. The Ottomans defeated Hunyadi's army in the Battle of Kosovo between 17th and 18th of October. Hunyadi's deputy, Nicholas Vizaknai, urged Vlad to come meet him in Transylvania, but Vlad refused him. Vladislav II returned to Wallachia at the head of the remnants of his army. Vlad was forced to flee the Ottoman Empire before December 7th, 1448. So here's a little documentation. Here's a Vlad's letter to the counselors of Brasov. We bring you news that Nicholas Vizaknai writes to us and asks us to be so kind as to come to him until John Hunyadi returns from the war. We are unable to do this because of an emissary from Nicopolis came to us and said with great certainty that Murad II had defeated Hunyadi. If we came to Vizaknai now, the Ottoman could come to kill both you and us. Therefore, we ask you to have patience until we see what has happened to Hunyadi. If he returns from the war, we will meet him, and we will make peace with him. But if you will be our enemies now, if something happens, you will have to answer for it before God. What do you think about that letter?
I don't know. I just think that he's trying to convince them. Don't do it. Don't do it. If we have to do it, we don't want to do it.
Okay, nice. Why does he sound like has an Indian accent?
No.
All right, so let's see what happens next. So Vlad first settled in Edirne in the Ottoman Empire after his fall. Not long after, he moved to Moldavia, where Bogdan II, which is his father's brother-in-law and possibly his maternal uncle, had mounted the throne with John Hunyadi's support on the autumn of 1449. After Bogdan was murdered by Peter III of Arran on October 1451, Bogdan's son, Stephen, fled to Transylvania with Vlad to seek assistance from Hunyadi. However, Hunyadi concluded a three-year truce with the Ottoman Empire on November 20th, 1451, acknowledging the Wallachian boyars' right to elect the successor of Vladislav II if he died. Vlad allegedly wanted to settle in Brasov, which was the center of the Wallachian boyars expelled by Vladislav II, but Hunyadi forbade the burghers to give shelter to him on February 6, 1452. Vlad returned to Moldavia, where Alexandru had dethroned Peter Aaron. The events of his life during the years that followed are unknown. He must have returned to Hungary before July 3rd, 1456, because on that day, Hunyadi informed the townspeople of Brasov that he had tasked Vlad with the defense of the Transylvanian border. So the circumstances and date of Vlad's return to Wallachia are uncertain. He invaded Wallachia with Hungarian support either in April or July or August 1456. Vladislav II died during the invasion. Vlad sent his first extant letter as Voivode of Wallachia to the burghers of Brasov on September 10th. He promised to protect them in case of an Ottoman invasion in Transylvania, in Ottoman Empire in Transylvania, but he also sought their assistance of the Ottomans occupied Wallachia. In the same letter, he stated that when a man or prince is strong and powerful, he can make peace as he wants to, but when he is weak, a stronger one will come and do what he wants to him, following his authoritarian personality, which shows his authoritarian personality. So what do you think is going on with him right now?
Sorry, I was eating a cookie. I had to mute myself.
Okay.
I think he's trying to get up there in the ranks.
Really? Because right now he's starting to show a little bit, little things are starting to show with his personality.
Okay.
So let's see what happens. You ready to see what happens?
Yes.
Okay. So multiple sources recorded that hundreds or thousands of people were executed at Vlad's order at the beginning of his reign. He began a purge against the boyars who had participated in the murder of his father and elder brother, or whom he suspected of plotting against him.
Vengeance.
Yeah, Chakokondiles, the guy from earlier, stated that Vlad quickly effected a great change and utterly revolutionized the affairs of Wallachia through granting the money, property, and other goods of his victims to his retainers. The lists of the members of the princely council during Vlad's reign also show that only two of them, Voiko Derberta and Iova, were able to retain their positions between 1457 and 1461. So Vlad sent the customary tribute to the Sultan after John Hunyadi died in August 11th, 1456. His elder son, Ladislaus Hunyadi, became the Captain General of Hungary. Oh, were you saying something? Oh, okay. So he accused Vlad of having no intention of remaining faithful to the King of Hungary in a letter to the burghers of Brasov, also ordering them to support Vladislav II's brother, Dan III, against Vlad. The burghers of Sibiu supported another pretender, a priest of the Romanians who calls himself a prince's son. The latter identified as Vlad's illegitimate brother, Vlad the Monk. Took possession of Almash, which had customarily been held by the rulers of Wallachia and Transylvania. So, Ladislaus V of Hungary had Ladislaus Hunyadi executed on March 16th, 1457. Hunyadi's mother, Ursabet Silagi, and her brother Michael Sliagi stirred up a rebellion against the king. Taking advantage of the civil war in Hungary, Vlad assisted Stephen, son of Bogdan II of Moldavia, in his move to seize Moldavia in June 1457. Vlad also broke into Transylvania and plundered the village around Brasov of Sibiu. The earliest German stories about Vlad recounted that he had carried men, women, children from a Saxon village to Wallachia and had them impaled. Since the Transylvanian Saxons remained loyal to the king, Vlad's attack against them strengthened the position of the Siliagis. So what do you think about that?
It's terrible.
So now he's become the Impaler.
Because of the way of his executions?
Yeah. And he did that to like women and children, not just the men, but the women and the children too. That was a line from Star Wars. Huh? You know? Yeah.
No, I don't watch it.
You're missing out.
I cannot get into it.
Super cool.
I've thought about giving The Mandalorian a chance.
Yeah, that one's really good, but I don't know if you would get a lot of it if you're not already a Star Wars fan.
Probably not. Right over my head.
You may give it a shot. You might not get what's going on and be like, the Empire? What in the world is the Empire? Why did
I kind of know that only because I've seen things like previews and merch and stuff like that, but yeah, I don't know too much about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. It's okay. So Vlad's representatives participated in the peace negotiations between Michael Siliagi and the Saxons. According to their treaty, the burghers of Brasov agreed that they would expel Dan from their town. Vlad promised the merchants of Sibiu could freely buy and sell goods in Wallachia in exchange for the same treatment of the Wallachian merchants in Transylvania. Vlad referred to Michael Siliagi as his lord and elder brother in a letter on December 1st, 1457. So, what?
Nothing. Just listening.
Okay. Ladislaus Hunyadi's younger brother, Matthias Corvinus, was elected king of Hungary on January 24th, 1458. He had a successful king run. Good job. Congratulations on your election as king. I didn't know you could be elected king. So he ordered the burghers of Sibiu to keep the peace with Vlad on March 3rd. Vlad styled himself lord and ruler over all of Wallachia and the Duchess of Almash and Fagaras. On September 20th, 1459, showing that he had taken possession of both of these traditional Transylvanian fiefs of the rulers of Wallachia. Michael Siliagi allowed the boyar Michael, an official of Vladislav II of Wallachia, and other Wallachian boyars to settle in Transylvania in late March 1458. Before long, Vlad had the boyar Michael killed. So in May, Vlad asked the burghers of Brasov to send craftsmen to Wallachia, but his relationship with the Saxons deteriorated before the end of the year. According to a scholarly theory, the conflict emerged after Vlad forbade the Saxons to enter Wallachia, forcing them to sell their goods to Wallachian merchants at compulsory border fairs. Vlad's protectionist tendencies, or border fairs, are not documented. Instead, in 1476, Vlad emphasized that he had always promoted free trade during his reign. Wow, what a great guy.
Yeah, peach.
Yeah. So Saxons confiscated the steel that Wallachian merchants had bought in Brasov without repaying the price to him. In response, Vlad ransacked and tortured some Saxon merchants. According to a letter of Basarab Lyota, the son of Dan II of Wallachia, wrote on January 21st, 1459, Basarab had settled in Sigishiora and laid claim to Wallachia. However, Matthias Corvinus supported Dan III, who was again in Brasov, against Vlad. Dan III stated that Vlad had Saxon merchants and their children impaled or burnt alive in Wallachia. And that was because somebody just didn't repay one other guy that had nothing to do with him.
Oh,
What?
it's still bad.
Yeah, he basically tortured. He basically did all. Okay, he's gonna say what exactly he did.
Okay.
Basharab Lyota's letter to the counselors of Brashov and Tara Barsay. So this is what he said. So, you know that King Matthias has sent me, and when I came to Tara Barsay, the officials and counselors of Brashov and the old men of Tara Barsay cried to us with broken hearts about the things with which Dracula, our enemy, did. How he did not remain faithful to our lord the king and had sided with the Ottomans. He had captured all the merchants of Brashov and Tara Barsay who had gone in peace to Wallachia and took all their wealth. But he was not satisfied with only the wealth of these people, but he imprisoned them and impaled them, 41 in all. Nor were these people enough. He became even more evil and gathered 300 boys from Brashov and Tara Barsay that he found in Wallachia. Of these, he impaled some and burned others.
Oh.
So, what you don't seem to be enjoying that.
No, he's terrible.
Yeah, but he had free trade, so he's okay.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. But man, that's probably a really bad way to go.
If Trump was around back then, huh?
Oh. Shots fired. You're roasted and toasted.
Psychopath.
25th Amendment, more like 25th Jessica Mint. Boom.
Anywho.
Yeah. So Dan III broke into Wallachia, but Vlad defeated and executed him before April 22nd, 1460. Vlad invaded southern Transylvania and destroyed the suburbs of Brashov, ordering the impalement of all men and women who had been captured. During the ensuing negotiations, Vlad demanded the expulsion or punishment of all Wallachian refugees from Brashov. Peace had been restored before July 26, 1460, when Vlad addressed the burghers of Brashov as his brothers and friends. Vlad invaded the region of Almash and Fagarash in August 24th to punish the local inhabitants who had supported Dan III. So,
what a megasaurus.
Yo, snap. You told him.
Coming in hot with the jokes.
Yo, snap. You sure burned him, a guy who's been dead for 600 years.
Okay.
Okay, so Konstantin Mikhailovich, who served as janissary in the Sultan's army, recorded that Vlad refused to pay homage to the Sultan in an unspecified year. The Renaissance historian Giovanni Maria degli Anglioli, got enough names, likewise wrote that Vlad had failed to pay tribute to the Sultan of 3 years. It was Angiolelli, if you want to know. So both records suggest that Vlad ignored the suzerainty of the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. Already in 1459, both works were written decades after the events. Tursun Beg, a secretary in the Sultan's court, stated that Vlad only turned against the Ottoman Empire when the Sultan was away on a long expedition in Trebizond in 1461. According to Tursun Beg, Vlad started new negotiations with Matthias Corvinus, but the Sultan was soon informed by his spies. Mehmed sent his envoy, the Greek Thomas Katabalinos, also known as Yunus Bey, to Wallachia, ordering Vlad to come to Constantinople. He also sent secret instructions to Hamza Bey of Nicopolis to capture Vlad after he crossed the Danube. Vlad found out the Sultan's deceit and trickery. He captured Hamza and Katabalinos and had them executed. After the execution of the Ottoman officials, Vlad gave order in fluent Turkish in fluent Turkish to the commander of the fortress of Giurgiu to open the gates, enabling the Wallachian soldiers to break in the fortress and capture it. He invaded the Ottoman Empire, devastating the villages along the Danube. He informed Matthias Corvinus about the military action in a letter on February 11th, 1462. He stated that more than 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians had been killed at his order during the campaign. He sought military assistance from Corvinus, declaring that he had broken the peace with the Sultan for the honor of the king and the Holy Crown of Hungary, and for the preservation of Christianity and the strengthening of the Catholic faith. The relationship between Moldavia and Wallachia had become tense by 1462, according to the letter of Genoese governor of Kaffa. So what do you think about that whole thing, about him, what his justifications were?
I don't know. He's makes a reason for everything and anything. Do what he has to do.
He does what he has to do because he's a good Christian.
Yeah.
That's why I killed all of them. That's basically what he said.
Everything and anything can be justified. Right?
Yeah. So, having learnt of Vlad's invasion, Mehmed II raised an army of more than 150,000 strong that was said to be the second in size only to one that accompanied Constantinople in 1453, according to Chakokan dials. The size of the army suggests that the Sultan wanted to accompany Wallachia, according to a number of historians, including Franz Babinger, Radu Florescu, and Nicolae Stoicescu. On the other hand, Mehmed had granted Wallachia to Vlad's brother Radu before the invasion of Wallachia, showing that the Sultan's principal purpose was only the change of the ruler of Wallachia. Let's see. So the Ottoman fleet landed in Braila, which was the only Wallachian port in Danube, in May. So the main Ottoman army crossed the Danube under the command of the Sultan of Nicopolis on June 4th, 1462. Outnumbered by the enemy, Vlad adopted a scorched earth policy and retreated toward Targovishte during the night of June 16th to 17th. Vlad broke into the Ottoman camp in an attempt to capture or kill the Sultan. Either the imprisonment or the death of the Sultan would have caused a panic among the Ottomans, which could have enabled Vlad to defeat the Ottoman army. However, the Wallachians missed the court of the Sultan himself and attacked the tents of the viziers Mahmud Pasha and Isaac. Having failed to attack the Sultan's camp, Vlad and his retainers left the Ottoman camp at dawn. Mehmed entered Targovishte at the end of June. The town had been deserted, but the Ottomans were horrified to discover a forest of the impaled.
Ooh.
Thousands of stakes with the carcasses of executed people. I was on board with thousands of stakes. I like that. But then
yes.
with the carcasses of it, then you lost me. So according to Charcarco dials. So here's a letter. Here's an excerpt from the histories, page 393 in Book 9, Chapter 104. So here's what he has to say. The Sultan's army entered into the area of the impalements, which was 17 stades long and 17 stades wide. So stades was also was an ancient Greek unit of length based on the circumference of a typical sports stadium at the time, which was equal to 600 feet. And there were 17 of them. So that was a lot.
That is a lot.
So there were large stakes there on which, as it was said, about 20,000 men, women, and children had been spitted. Quite a sight for the Turks and the Sultan himself. The Sultan was seized with the amazement and said that it was not possible to deprive of his country a man who had done such great deeds, who had such a diabolical understanding of how to govern his realm and its people. And he said that a man who had done such things was worth much. The rest of the Turks were dumbfounded when they saw the multitude of men on the stakes. There were infants, too, affixed to their mothers on the stakes, and birds had made their nests on their entrails. So what do you think about this guy? Great guy or amazing guy?
He's sick.
Oh, yeah. Jeez. I don't know what his mindset of all when he does this stuff.
I don't know. Kind of probably similar to most killers. Like, at first, it's a rush. At this point, it's just like, whatever now to him.
Yeah, because imagine walking into a town and everyone in the town is all, like, impaled on, like, a bunch of stakes.
It probably made him feel like the more I kill, the more people will listen to me and the more I'm in charge.
Maybe that's his mindset. And probably
Psycho.
is, because he is pretty much a warlord, and that's basically what warlords think.
Yeah.
So Tursun Beg recorded that the Ottomans suffered from summer heat and thirst during the campaign. The Sultan decided to retreat from Wallachia and march toward Brela. Stephen III of Moldavia hurried to Chilea to seize the important fortress where a Hungarian garrison had been placed. So Vlad had also deported for Chilea, but left behind a troop of 6,000 strong to try and hinder the march of the Sultan's army, but the Ottomans defeated the Wallachians. Stephen of Moldavia was wounded during the siege of Chilea and returned to Moldavia before Vlad came to the fortress. The main Ottoman army left Wallachia, but Vlad's brother Radu and his Ottoman troops stayed behind in the Baragan plain. Radu sent messages to the Wallachians reminding them that the Sultan could again invade their country. Although Vlad defeated Radu and his Ottoman allies in 2 battles during the following months, more and more Wallachians deserted to Radu. Vlad withdrew to the Carpathian Mountains, hoping that Matthias Corvinus would help him regain his throne. However, Albert of Istanmezo, the deputy of the Count of Shekels, had recommended in mid-August that the Saxons recognize Radu. Radu also made an offer to the burghers of Brasov to confirm their commercial privileges and pay them a compensation of 5,000 ducats. So Vlad is no longer in power. What do we think? Now it's this Radu guy.
Now he needs to be impaled.
You think he should be impaled? A little bit of a little taste of his own medicine?
1 foot and hand at a time.
1 foot and hand at a time?
Yes, very slowly.
Jeez Louise, maybe we should do an episode on you.
He killed so many people, so many innocent people that did not deserve that.
That's true. So you think he should be like poetic justice?
I feel he should suffer.
Oh, snap.
Somebody gotta peel off each fingernail.
Oh my gosh, dude.
And then start peeling his skin off little by little.
Oh my gosh. Would you do it by
I mean, I
hand,
haven't thought about it, but I'm just saying.
You should be Jessica the Filleter. Would you use like a tool or your own hands?
For him, this guy?
Yeah.
Probably a tool.
Oh, yeah.
Like an old rusty tool.
Jeez, so we could get infected as well?
Yes.
Oh, snap. I'm pretty sure they didn't have tetanus shots back then. So, well. Well, let's see what happens afterwards. So, also...
Hey, wait, have you ever seen this movie called I Spit in Your Grave, Part 2?
I've heard of it.
Oh, it sounds similar to what I'm saying, so if you ever want to get grossed out.
No, I don't want to get grossed out.
It's pretty graphic, it's pretty brutal. But
I don't want to see anything that makes me sad or like grossed out.
Yeah, it'll make you grossed out, but it makes you mad. it makes you mad.
Why would
for
it
her, for the person?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like things like Hostel, which is also very graphic.
Yeah, kind of. She just it's pretty much a girl getting revenge on people that did her wrong, pretty much.
Oh, okay.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a photo of that battle that I mentioned earlier. Here's a painting of it. This is how it looked. This is a painting.
Yeah. Got it. Battle with torches.
Yeah, it's literally called The Battle with Torches. That's the title of the painting. How did you know the title of the painting?
I'm looking.
Oh. I thought you just guessed.
No.
I thought you were just super smart.
Oh, well.
So Matthias Corvinus came to Transylvania on November 1462. The negotiations between Corvinus and Vlad lasted for weeks, but Corvinus did not want to wage war against the Ottoman Empire. At the king's order, his Czech mercenary commander, Jan Jeskra of Brandeis, captured Vlad near Rukar in Wallachia. To provide an explanation for Vlad's imprisonment to Pope Pius II and the Venetians, who had sent money to finance the campaign against the Ottoman Empire, Corvinus presented 3 letters allegedly written by Vlad on November 7th, 1462, to Mehmed II, Mahmud Pasha, and Stephen of Moldavia. According to the letters, Vlad offered to join his forces with the Sultan's army against Hungary if the Sultan restored him to his throne. Most historians agree that the documents were forged to give grounds for Vlad's imprisonment. Corvinus' court historian, Antonio Bonfini, admitted that the reason for Vlad's imprisonment was never clarified. I give you 3 guesses about why he was imprisoned, because it's beyond me.
I have no idea.
So, Florescu writes, the style of writing, the rhetoric of meek submission, hardly compatible with what we know of Dracula's character, clumsy wording, and poor Latin, are all evidence that the letters could not have been written in Vlad's order. He associates the author of the forgery with the Saxon priest of Brasov. So Vlad was first imprisoned in the city of Belgrade, which is now called Alba Iulia in Romania. According to Chalcocodiles, before long he was taken to Visegrad, where he was held for 14 years. No documents referring to Vlad between 1462 and 1475 have been preserved. In the summer of 1475, Stephen III of Moldavia sent his envoys to Matthias Corvinus, asking him to send Vlad to Wallachia against Basarab Lyota, who had submitted himself to the Ottomans. Stephen wanted to ensure Wallachia for a ruler who had been an army of the Ottoman Empire, because the Wallachians were, like the Turks to the Moldavians, according to his letter. According to Slavic stories about Vlad, he was only released after he converted to Catholicism. So he was in prison. He served in jail for 14 years. So what do you think of that? Do you think all deeds done?
Jeez Louise.
Is it good?
Slap on the wrist.
You just got slapped on there. You only 14 years of prison. You think that's good?
it? For slaying a whole, pretty much genocide. You know, and it's not because it wasn't a specific race or whatever, but it still was. He killed so many people.
Okay, so he converted to Christianity, so now all things are forgiven.
Oh, yeah, all things are forgiven when that happens.
Yep. So Matthias Corvinus recognized Vlad as the lawful prince of Wallachia, but he did not provide him military assistance to regain his principality. Vlad settled on a house in Pest. When a group of soldiers broke into the house while pursuing a thief who had tried to hide there, Vlad had their commander executed because they had not asked his permission before entering his home. According to the Slavic stories about his life, Vlad moved to Transylvania on June 1475. What?
This guy! I'm a Christian now, but you must die.
He didn't ask his permission to enter his home. I mean...
Oh. must die.
But he was running. It was
Kill
a guy who was running after a thief who ran into his house, and he ran after him, and then he killed him because he didn't ask permission.
Whatever, man. He'll be forgiven. You know.
He'll be forgiven. So he wanted to settle in Sibiu and sent his envoy to the town in early June to arrange a house for him. Mahmud II acknowledged Basarab Lyota as the lawful ruler of Wallachia. Corvinus ordered the burghers of Sibiu to give 200 golden florins to Vlad from the loyal revenues on September 21st, but Vlad left Transylvania for Buda in October. So Vlad bought a house in Pécs, which became known as Dracula's house.
Drac.
Mm-hmm. In January 1476, John Pongrak of Dengeleg, voivode of Transylvania, urged the people of Brasov to send Vlad all of his supporters who had settled in the town because Corvinus and Basarab Lyota had concluded a treaty. The relationship between the Transylvanian Saxons and Basarab remained tense, but the Saxons gave shelter to Basarab's opponents during the following months. Corvinus dispatched Vlad and the Serbian Vuk Gregovic to fight against the Ottomans in Bosnia in early 1476. They captured Srebrenica and other fortresses on February and March 1476. So Mehmed II invaded Moldavia and defeated Stephen III in the Battle of Valdea Alba on July 26, 1476. Stephen Bathory and Vlad entered Moldavia, forcing the Sultan to lift the siege of the fortress at Targu Niemt. In late August, according to the letter of Matthias Corvinus, the contemporaneous Jacob unrest added to the Vuk Gregoric. This guy has like 3 consonants that should not be together, that is not separated by a vowel. So, and a member of the noble Jakshish family, who also participated in the struggle against the Ottomans in Moldavia. So Matthias Corvinus ordered the Transylvanian Saxons to support Bathory's planned invasion of Wallachia on September 6, 1476, also informing them that Stephen of Moldavia would also invade Wallachia. Vlad stayed in Brasov and informed the commercial privileges of the local burghers in Wallachia on October 7th, 1476. Hi, my name is Steve. I'm a local burgher. Nice to meet you. I know it probably means something else in Eastern Europe.
Maybe.
It's spelled differently. So Bathory's forces captured... so Stephen of Moldavia and Vlad ceremoniously confirmed their alliance, and they occupied Bucharest, forcing Basarab Lyota to seek refuge in the Ottoman Empire on November 16th. So Vlad informed the merchants of Brasov about his victory, urging them to come to Wallachia. He was crowned before November 26th. Yay! He's back. He has power again.
Dang. 14 years.
This is like the 3rd time, I think.
Nothing.
This is like the 3rd time. This is the 3rd time he was it was like the 3rd time that he became...
Was it the 3rd time?
Yeah. What? Yeah, it was the 3rd time he became in power. So Basarab Lyota returned to Wallachia with Ottoman support, and Vlad died fighting against them in late December 1476 or early January 1477. In a letter written on January 10th, 1477, Stephen III of Moldavia related that Vlad's Moldavian retinue had also been massacred. According to Leonardo Botta, the Milanese ambassador to Buda, the Ottomans cut Vlad's corpse into pieces. Bonfini wrote that Vlad's head was sent to Mahmud II. So the place of his burial is unknown. What? Why are you laughing?
I'm only okay with that if he was still alive when it happened.
Oh, snap. So, so Vlad got his comeuppance. He was killed. So his place of his burial is unknown. So according to a popular tradition, which was first recorded in the late 19th century, Vlad was buried in the monastery of Snagov. However, the excavations carried out by Dino V. Rossetti in 1933 found no tomb below the supposed unmarked tombstone of Vlad of the monastery church. Rossetti reported, under the tombstone attributed to Vlad, there was no tomb, only bones and jaws of horses. So historian Konstantin Razachevinci said Vlad was most probably buried in the first church of Komada Monastery, which had been established by Vlad and was near the battlefield where he was killed. So let's see about the women in his life. I'm sure he was quite the lady killer. So anyway,
no pun intended.
So Vlad had 2 wives. What a great guy. So according to modern specialists, his first wife may have been the illegitimate daughter of John Hunyadi, according to historian Alexandru Simon. Vlad's second wife was Justina Silagi, who was a cousin of Matthias Corvinus. She was the widow of Vencel Pongrach of St. Miklos, when Ladislav Dragwilia married her, most probably in 1475. So she survived Vlad Dracul and first married Pal Suki when Janos Erdely, then Janos
You're right there?
Erdely.
You okay?
There's like so many names. It's hard to pronounce. Yeah, it's kind of hard to pronounce these names. So Vlad's eldest son, Minia, was born in 1462. I wonder how he was as a father. Vlad's unnamed second son was killed before 1486. Vlad's third son, Vlad Dracula, unsuccessfully laid claim to Wallachia around 1495. He was the forefather of the noble Dracula family. Good job. So, story about Vlad's brutal acts began circulating during his lifetime. After his arrest, courtiers of Matthias Corvinus prompted their spread. The papal legate Niccolo Madrusiensi had already written about such stories to Pope Pius II in 1462. 2 years later, the Pope included them in his commentaries. The Meistersinger, Michael Bahim, wrote a lengthy poem about Vlad's deeds, allegedly based on his conversation with a Catholic monk who had managed to escape from Vlad's prison. The poem, called Story of a Despot Called Dracula, Voivode of Wallachia, was performed at the court of Frederick III, Holy Roman Emperor of Wiener Neustadt, during the winter of 1463. According to one of Bahim's stories, Vlad had 2 monks impaled to assist them to go to heaven, also ordering the impalement of their donkey because it had begun braying after its master's death. Bahim also accused Vlad of duplicity, stating that Vlad had promised support to both Matthias Corvinus and Mehmed II, but did not keep the promise. In 1475, Gabriel Rangoni, Bishop of Eger, and a former papal legate, understood that Vlad had been imprisoned because of his cruelty. Rangoni also recorded the rumor that while in prison, Vlad caught rats to cut them up into pieces or stuck them into small pieces of wood because he was unable to forget his wickedness.
Oh my God. Yeah. I have to kill something. I have to kill it.
Yeah.
Fucking psychopath.
No, stat.
Let's just keep putting him in charge of everybody.
Yeah.
You know.
Have you watched Epic Rap Battles of History?
Mm-mm.
In one of the episodes, it was actually Vlad Dracula versus the Universal's monster Dracula.
No. Okay.
And in one of his lines references him like doing this to rats. So he described Vlad. So Antonio Bonfini also recorded anecdotes about Vlad in his Historia Poetica around 1495. Bonfini wanted to justify both the removal and the restoration of Vlad by Matthias. One second. So he described Vlad as a man of unheard cruelty and justice. Bonfini's stories about Vlad were repeated in Sebastian Munster's Cosmography. Munster also recorded Vlad's reputation for tyrannical justice. So here's an article from that. So Turkish messengers came to Vlad to pay respects, but refused to take off their turbans, according to their ancient custom, whereupon he strengthened their custom by nailing their turbans to their heads with 3 spikes so that they could not take them off. So yeah, there's that. So works containing the stories about Vlad's cruelty were published in Low German in the Holy Roman Empire before 1480. These stories were allegedly written in the early 1460s because they described Vlad's campaign across the Danube in early 1462, but they did not refer to Mehmed II's invasion of Wallachia in June of the same year. They provide a detailed narration of the conflicts between Vlad and the Transylvanian Saxons, showing that they originated in the literary minds of the Saxons. Here's a a woodcut of Vlad and all the stuff. So that's how it looks.
Golly, that's terrible.
Yeah, and he's enjoying a meal.
He's unreal, man.
Yeah. So the invention of the movable type printing contributed to the popularity of stories about Vlad, making them one of the first bestsellers in Europe. To enhance sales, they were published in books with woodcuts on their title pages that depicted horrific scenes like the one I just showed you. For instance, the editions published in Nuremberg in 1499 and in Strasbourg in 1500 depict Vlad at a dining table surrounded by dead or dying people on poles, which was the one that I just showed. So here's an article from about a mischievous tyrant called Dracula, Voda. This is an article from that. So Vlad had a big copper cauldron built and put a lid made of wood with holes in it on top. He put the people in the cauldron and put their heads in the holes and fastened them there. Then he filled it with water and sent a fire underneath it and let people cry their eyes out until they were boiled to death. And then he invented frightening, terrible, unheard of tortures. He ordered that women be impaled together with their suckling babies and the same stake. The babies fought for their lives at their mother's breasts until they died. Then he had the woman's breast cut off and put the babies inside head first. Thus, he had impaled them together.
He's sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there are more than 20 manuscripts written between the 15th and 18th centuries which preserve the texts of the tale about Voivode Dracula. The manuscripts were written in Russian, but they copied a text that had originally been recorded in a South Slavic language. Because they contained expressions alien to the Russian language, but used in South Slavic idioms, such as diavol for evil. The original text had been written in Buda between 1482 and 1486. So 19 anecdotes in the Skazini are longer than the German stories about Vlad. They are a mixture of fact and fiction, according to historian Raymond T. McNally. Almost half the anecdotes emphasize, like the German stories, Vlad's brutality, but they also underline that his cruelty enabled him to strengthen the central government of Wallachia. For instance, the Skazini story writes of a golden cup that nobody dared to steal at a fountain, because Vlad hated stealing so violently that nobody who caused any evil or robbery did not live long, thereby promoting public order. In the German story about Vlad's campaign against Ottoman territory, underlined his cruel acts, while the Skazini emphasized his successful diplomacy, calling him evil wise. On the other hand, the Skazinis sharply criticized Vlad for his conversion to Catholicism, attributing his death to his apostasy. Some elements of the anecdotes were later added to the Russian stories about Ivan the Terrible of Russia. So, they were basically saying, well, he was a good statesman. That's got to account for something.
No.
No, you don't think so?
No.
So the mass murders Vlad carried out indiscriminately and brutally would most likely amount to acts of genocide and war crimes by current standards. Romanian Defense Minister Ion Marcia Pașcu asserted that Vlad would have been condemned for the crimes against humanity had he been put on trial at Nuremberg. Mm-hmm. So, the Cantacuzino Chronicle was the first Roman historical work to record a tale about Vlad the Impaler, narrating the impalement of the old boyars of Targoviște for the murder of his brother Dan. The chronicle added that Vlad forced the young boyars and their wives and children to build the Poianari Castle. The legend of Poianari Castle was mentioned in 1474 by Neophyte. Neophyte the First, Metropolitan of Ungaro-Wallachia, who complemented it with the story of Meshterul Manoli, who allegedly walled in his bride to prevent the crumbling of the walls of the castle during the building project. In the early 20th century, Constantine Radulescu Codin, a teacher in Muscul County, where the castle was situated, published a local legend about Vlad's letter of grant, written in rabbit skin, for the villagers who had helped him to escape from Poianari Castle to Transylvania during the Ottoman invasion of Wallachia and other villages of the region. The donation is attributed to the legendary Radu Negru. And here's the castle. Yeah, there's the castle. That's how it looks.
Okay. Cool.
Yep. So, Radulescu Codin recorded the further local legends, some of which were also known from the German and Slavic stories about Vlad, suggesting that the latter stories preserved oral tradition. For instance, the tales about the burning of the lazy and the poor and the lame at Vlad's order and the execution of the woman who had made her husband too short a shirt can also be found among the German and Slavic anecdotes. The peasants telling these tales knew that Vlad's sobriquet was connected to the frequent impalements during his reign, but they said only such cruel acts could secure public order in Wallachia. So, that's what they think. That's what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
So, most Romanian artists have regarded Vlad as just a ruler and a realistic tyrant who punished criminals and executed unpatriotic boyars to strengthen the central government. Ion Budai Delanu wrote the first Romanian epic poem focusing on him. Donalu's Gypsy epic, that doesn't sound very nice, which was published only in 1875, almost a century after its composition, presented Vlad as a hero, fighting against the boyars, Ottomans, or Stragoi, or vampires, and other evil spirits at the head of an army of gypsies and angels. The poet Dmitri Bolentininu emphasized Vlad's triumphs in his battles of the Romanians in the middle of the 19th century. He regarded Vlad as a reformer whose acts of violence were necessary to prevent the despotism of the boyars. One of the greatest Romanian poets, Mihai Eminescu, dedicated a historical ballad, The Third Letter, to the variant of princes of Wallachia, including Vlad. He urges Vlad to return from the grave and to eliminate and annihilate the enemies of the Romanian nation. So here's an excerpt from the Third Letter. You must come, O dread impaler, confound them to your care. Split them into two partitions, here the fools and rascals there. Shove them into two enclosures from the broad daylight and asylum, and then set fire to the prison and the lunatic asylum. In the early what?
Psycho. Another one.
So, in the early 1860s, the painter Theodor Amann depicted the meeting of Vlad and the Ottoman envoys, showing the envoys' fear of the Wallachian leader. So here's the actual painting. Here's the painting. Looks good. Good painting. Mm-hmm. Good job. So, and since the middle of the 19th century, Romanian historians have treated Vlad as one of the greatest Romanian leaders, emphasizing his fight for independence of the Romanian lands. Even Vlad's acts of cruelty were often represented as rational acts serving national interest. Alexandru Dimitri Zinopol was one of the first historians to emphasize that Vlad could only stop the internal fights of the boyar parties through his acts of terror. Constantine C. Gherescu remarked, the tortures and executions which Vlad ordered were not out of caprice, but always had a reason, and very often a reason of state. Ian Bogdan was one of the few Romanian historians who did not accept his heroic image. In his work, published in 1896, Vlad Tepes and the German and Russian narratives, he concluded that the Romanians should be ashamed of Vlad instead of presenting him as a model of courage and patriotism. According to an opinion poll conducted in 1999, 4.1% of the participants chose Vlad the Impaler as one of the most important historical personalities who have influenced the destiny of the Romanians for the better.
Right.
So what do you think about all that?
Wow.
You think he had a reason?
No.
Oh, yeah, I won. I won the festival. Hooray!
Hey, where'd you win? What festival? What happened?
I won the festival called the Virgin Springs Cinefest.
The what?
The Virgin Springs Cinefest. It's a film festival in Calcutta.
Cool.
Yay,
congratulations.
We did it.
Yay.
Good job, everybody.
What do you get, like bragging rights?
I get a laurel that I get to put on my poster.
Nice.
Yeah. All right, so Vlad the Impaler's actions, were they good for the better of the nation?
Nope.
But that free trade.
Nope.
Okay, so the stories about Vlad made him the best-known medieval ruler of the Romanian lands in Europe. However, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was published in 1897, was the first book to make a connection between Dracula and vampirism. Stoker had his attention drawn at the blood-sucking vampires of Romanian folklore by Emily Gerard's article about Transylvanian superstitions, which was published around 1885. His limited knowledge about the medieval history of Wallachia came from William Wilkinson's book entitled Account of the Principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia with Political Observations Relative to them, published in 1820. Stoker apparently did not know much about Vlad the Impaler, certainly not enough for us to say that Vlad was the inspiration for Count Dracula, according to Elizabeth Miller. For instance, Stoker wrote that Dracula had been of Shakali origin only because he knew about both Attila the Hun's destructive campaigns and the alleged Hunnic origin of the Shelkeles. Stoker's main source, Wilkinson, who accepted the reliability of the German stories, described Vlad as a wicked man. Actually, Stoker's working papers for his book contain no references to the historical figure, the name of the character being named in all draughts, but the later ones Count Vampire. Consequently, Stoker borrowed the name and scraps of miscellaneous information about the history of Wallachia when writing the book about Count Dracula. So, Pope Pius II's legate, Nicola Madrusa, painted the only extant description of Vlad, whom he had met in Buda. A copy of Vlad's portrait had been featured in the Monster Portrait Gallery in the Ambras Castle in Innsbruck. The picture depicts a strong, cruel, and somehow tortured man, with large, deep-set, dark green and protruding eyes. According to Florescu, the color of Vlad's hair could not be determined because Madrusa's mentions that Vlad was black-haired, while the portrait seems to show that he had fair hair. The picture depicts Vlad with a large lower lip. So, Vlad's bad reputation in the German-speaking territories can be detected in a number of Renaissance paintings. He is portrayed among the witnesses of St. Andrew's martyrdom in the 15th century painting displayed in the Belvedere in Vienna. A figure similar to Vlad in one of the witnesses of Christ in the Calvary Chapel of the St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. So here's Nicolaus Madrusa's description of Vlad the Impaler. So Vlad was not very tall, but very stocky and strong, with a cold and terrible appearance. A strong aquiline nose, swollen nostrils, a thin reddish face, and the very long eyelashes formed large, wide, open green eyes. The bushy black eyebrows made them appear threatening. His face and chin were shaven, but for a mustache. The swollen temples increased the bulk of his head. A bull's neck connected with his head, from which black curly locks hung from his wide-shouldered person. Thus, ending the story of Vlad the Impaler.
He is something else.
That was something. That was really. Also, here's the portrait if you wanted to see it. It's very famous.
Oh yeah, it's crazy to me how this dude was the influence of Dracula.
Really?
Like everything kind of. It sounds familiar. It's kind of like one of those stories that's been told over the times and over the years. It's kind of snowballed into what now Dracula is.
Yeah.
Because his name sounds the same. I mean, it sounds familiar. He was a crazy, fucked up man that did messed up stuff. It all happened in Transylvania, Romania, whatever. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about most of his actions that he done during his reign?
Man, I don't know. It's crazy and unreal that he became a leader, a ruler 3 times. But maybe it's because, yes, it was a really, really long time ago. Things didn't really travel that fast back then. A lot of people didn't know probably of the stuff that he did. It's not on the interwebs. Was not on the interwebs. There wasn't such thing.
Yeah. But I mean, he's done some terrible things.
Terrible.
And a lot of it had very no reason. But a lot of people in Romania believe that he was a cool guy.
Yeah.
That
whatever.
It was a necessary evil in order to keep order to Romania.
Oh, that's just like saying that freaking, what's his name? Snap Guy.
I don't know who Snap Guy is.
Yes, you do. Endgame.
Oh,
So good.
Thanos.
That's just like saying that what he did or what he wanted to do, if he was real, is justifiable because he's got to keep the order.
I don't know. Have you been to the Thanos did nothing wrong subreddit?
No, I'm okay with not being over there.
Okay, I don't know. I've never been in there.
Golly, probably Trump supporters too.
Oh snap! Oh geez. Dang, sis, that's some hot tea.
It's just people are so full of shit these days, you know, and they just believe everything and anything and can make truths out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They convince themselves enough.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the story of Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Impaler. That guy was something else. Something else.
Sure was.
So anyway, that's the episode for today. This is the first episode that we did after the Trump insurrection, which is a whole nother thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Which I do want to do an episode on that as well. Maybe in the future. Let's see.
Okay.
So that's it. I've been Nathaniel Avila.
No, I've been Jessica Vega.
And we were here to say goodbye.
Thank you for listening to a Vision podcast, home of Wacky Talkies, The Kingdom, Evil Exists, and many more.